joining us now. Congressman, good to have you with us.
Oh, John, great to be back. I have to say that being on your show 2 consecutive weeks to receive that invitation, I'm really honored. Good to be back with you.
Congressman, you're the man of the hour. You're involved in everything. I'm going to get right to a clip that we put together just for you.
But this domestic terror threat is increasingly the new reality here. And we can take practical steps to address it, to allow members who have concealed weapons permits to be able to carry a personal firearm with the express permission and knowledge of the base commander. In a situation, for example, like a recruiter going down to Lynn Haven Mall, for example, that recruiter is prohibited by DOD regulations at present from carrying a concealed weapon with his uniform.
Should we be worrying any more about ISIS today than we were a month ago, 3 months ago, or 6 months ago?
I'm a data-driven, fact-driven representative, and our office is the same. And no objective assessment of the track record here leads to a conclusion other than the risk is heightened, and then in all probability it's going to continue to be heightened. It doesn't mean we need to be fearful.
Is it possible that if someone was armed yesterday, there could have been less casualties? Is it possible?
It's certainly possible. I'm not going to go so far as to say that we would have known the outcome, but Marines know how to handle firearms, and they're prepared mentally, physically to respond. And I'm convinced that it would have been a better outcome, or at least our Marines would have felt like they had a fighting chance, and that's what we owe them.
Okay, I think you hit the nail on the head, Congressman. Today, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, presidential candidate, second in the polls to Donald Trump, issued an executive order Tuesday to let the National Guard troops carry guns at recruitment centers. I think you're spot on with this, Congressman. How do we make it law?
Well, first, John, we're heading off here on a tough topic. The House floor last night paused. It was a very, frankly, emotional moment. Speaker Boehner stopped, and Chuck Fleischman, who represents Chattanooga, spoke with eloquence and deep conviction on this matter. And, look, I had the privilege of wearing a Marine uniform, but this eclipses this. It's not just one service. Of course, we had a fine sailor who was killed. And it's a serious matter. It has the attention of Congress. And what needs to happen, John, to your point, is that the Secretary of Defense Carter, under the direction of President Obama, or perhaps not, needs to go ahead and pivot and do what he has the authority to do, John, and that is to give commanding officers the option, the latitude, the discretion to allow service members to arm themselves in a responsible way, and I'd say in a concealed way, unless it's a service-issued firearm, but in a concealed way, so that if something like this horrific attack that unfolded in Chattanooga starts to take place somewhere else, some other recruiting center or a reserve center, that our fine young men and women, our sons, daughters, moms, and dads, have what I think is the most basic human right, the right to life and the right to defend themselves. So the authority is there. I'm glad we passed the amendment. I wish that things would have been different, and those Marines and indeed the sailor had the opportunity, the potential to defend themselves. But that wasn't the case. But John, Americans are not good at being victims. You can hit us once, we'll absorb it, but we're going to figure out what to do next, and that's what we need to do right now.
Let's get to the reality here. Secretary of Defense Ash Carter, I was kind of excited when he got in. I'm not a fan of his now. A lot of things have gone down in the past 90 days. But his first reaction to this, Congressman, is, well, let's have them take the uniforms off and put plain clothes on. Wow. That was his first reaction.
John, well-intentioned, but flawed. It's deeply flawed. It speaks to who we are as Americans, our character. And there's a ruggedness about Americans. It's not, look, we got some cowboy in us, that kind of DNA, but I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about a provocative, to where we're actually provoking someone. But we are resolute. when we're at our best and we're as Americans. And to tell a Marine, hey, go to work today in civilian garb, something's profoundly wrong with that. And I think, now look, they're good men. I respect Secretary Carter, and I'm reserving final judgment. I think the world of Joe Dunford, our general and Commandant of the Marine Corps. I know him, and I'm delighted, really, that he's going to be a chairman of our Joint Chiefs of Staff. That said, I'm in firm disagreement with their initial pivot. I'm sure it's well intentioned. Okay, let's get this out of harm's way. But where in the world did the 40 miles from Chattanooga come from? I mean, are we any less at risk here? I'm in D.C. right now, but in Virginia Beach or Norfolk or Hampton Roads or, out west, are we any less risk because we're not 40 miles within Chattanooga? I mean, where's the logic of that?
None.
And there's something about telling a service member to take his or her uniform off. I mean, there's no prouder day for me than when I graduated from Parris Island. John, I've been on your show many times, and if I ever mention my service, I always make sure I say, hey, it was undistinguished. I just went to a reserve unit for 6 years. But I wore that uniform with pride, never got activated, never got shot at. But I still to this day identify as a Marine. And you cannot, that uniform means so much to each service member. So that was wrong on multiple levels. There's a lack of decisiveness. I mean, look at the whole thing about lowering the flags to half staff. Man, where's the commander-in-chief? He should have that day, out of just profound remorse or just empathy and sympathy and respect for the families, look, I want these flags at half staff, and tell the nation why. And something's not right here, John, and I'm not. This isn't an R or a D issue. It really isn't, but it is a leadership issue. Mm-hmm. And it's what do we believe about ourselves, and who are we as a people? So it's not a good time right now. I think you were kind of you kind of hinted at that at your introduction here. There's some rough times, but look, we can pick ourselves up. I have a hardened optimism about our country, John. Hardened optimism. I get it. I get our fiscal situation. I get the partisanship. I get all that. But we are not victims here. I tell you what, John, what's facing us right now as a nation, do we really think it's any more difficult than when the British were overrunning our capital? No. I mean, we've been through profound challenges, but we find it within ourselves to navigate our way out. Now, I just realized I've been ranting here for a moment, so I'll stop.
Now, look, you can't get change if you don't start calling things out. And I really thought, as we talked about earlier, Ash Carter's first reaction was to strip yourself of the uniform that you pride yourself on in order for some form of protection, rather than arm yourself, which you're trained to do. I thought was one of the most outrageous comments I've heard from a secretary.
No, he missed it. It's a deeply flawed decision. Could you imagine if the president, with a respective secretary, service chief, went out to the Rose Garden, or better yet, I don't know if he needs to go to Chattanooga or not. We've set that decision aside, but basically say to the nation, hey, we're not going to stand for this. And I ask for every mayor and every town with a recruiting office, do what you can to give our recruiting offices some protection while we figure this thing out.
Right.
And there is not a mayor or a city council in America, it doesn't matter what city you're from, most liberal city in America, that wouldn't say, you know what, we can do that. We can give you 90 days of bell-to-bell armed guard assistance. And I tell you what, if you couldn't get that, there truly would be, not that I don't know if this would work or not, but just citizens would do it. Let's just set that aside. I know that the police departments would have given the Secretary of Defense 90 days to kind of think through this, because if we're going to equip service members with a sidearm, which I support, not everyone, but enough. Think of them as guardian angels at a reserve unit, for example. Maybe out of the 12 full-time service members who are there to train the reservists once a month, like it was at my reserve unit, then the full-time service members, maybe 4 or 5 of them, maybe all of them would be qualified, but, on any one day, maybe half of them would have a service revolver on their hip. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't think anything of that. I wouldn't think that it's provocative. It isn't, it isn't militarizing our country on the domestic side. But if Marines hear that sound of gunfire, they're going to be just like our first responders. They're going to pivot to it, and they are going to go at it, and they're going to try to defend their fellow Marine,
right,
and sailors and soldiers, all the way around, and airmen and Coast Guardsmen.
Right. No, if you go down the same path, you end up in the same place. Let's stick with the military for a moment. This just out yesterday. There's legislation in the Senate right now to reduce the amount of military housing benefits to married couples that are in the military.
I saw that.
We got millions of dollars that we spend on nonsense every minute. Why are we tackling that now?
John, that is a horrible, misplaced priority. This is not the time to be cutting benefits for our service members, retirees. Look, there's a commission that worked through this thing, and we're working through that. But to advance that is not where our fiscal challenge is coming from. Our fiscal challenge, and the reason that this pressure is on not only on our Department of Defense, but the reason that we, are oftentimes driving around in third world type of roads and bridges and things like that, is that our nation has not confronted, and the leadership within Washington, of which I'm a part, but I'm doing something about it, we have not confronted this existential threat, to use that big fancy word, the existential threat posed by mandatory spending. I was with a group of Republicans and Democrats last night, and I tell you, I was encouraged, but also sobered by it. It was the express purpose of the meeting was to figure out how do we get the attention of our colleagues on both sides to say, hey, we've got to deal with this. Don't go to sleep on us thinking that we're okay because the deficits are down. They're still unsustainable. We still have twice as much debt right now as we did when we went into the 2008 crisis. And look, this isn't fear-mongering here, but there are some metrics. I mean, data-driven, provable metrics that say, listen, we are flat out in the orange category and really in the red in terms of our fiscal health. And not enough members are talking about it. Not enough members understand it. And the same is true of the American people. But we can do something about that. I was suggesting ways last night about how we can address that and improve the level of knowledge within Congress and also within the general public. Not every Democrat, John, certainly not in Virginia too, is just setting aside this concern over our fiscal situation. It may surprise maybe some listeners, I don't know, but if you really slow down and talk to thoughtful Democrats and you say, how do you feel about our fiscal situation? They'll go, man, this isn't good. You have my attention. Most of them will do that. And then, we don't always agree on how to address it, but that's actually encouraging to me that, a lot of Dems are concerned about it.
To what you just said, we had Congressman, your colleague from Virginia's 7th District, Dave Bratt, on the other day, and he said, look, I did the math. I'm an economist. By 2027, mandatory spending is going to eat up every dime that we have that comes in through money that we raise. Every dime of it. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I haven't look, I respect Dave's math, and I have no doubt if I sat down next to him, and I will today on the House floor, and said, "Hey, Dave, let me see where your data is." That is very much within the realm of possibility. That's not out of the indefensible hyperbole. I think he's solid on that. My gut instinct is he's right on. And again, we don't have to. That isn't inevitable. It's inevitable absent wise decision making. But what I'm trying to do is have really even a renewed effort on this matter, because it's been a concern of mine ever since, in fact, before I even won the seat and had the privilege to serve our district. I remember a good advisor of mine telling me about halfway through the campaign, it was a 17-month campaign, he said, Scott, you got to talk about something other than our fiscal situation and our debt.
Right.
And I said, listen, if we don't get that right, nothing else matters. And I said, I think part of my job is not to just take a poll and say, oh, where are the American people? There's value in that, John, and I need to do that. I need to listen to the district. But there are times when the member, whether House or Senate or City Council or school board or whatever, you got to lead. You got to lead based on the facts and your gut instinct. So I said, I appreciate your concern, but really all of this is tied into job creation. It's tied into defending our military. The way that we have a strong military is we got to get our fiscal house in order. That's what's driving this compression on every discretionary line item, from roads and bridges to schools to better border enforcement. Every single line item on the discretionary side, that 1/3 of our federal budget that so much attention is paid to, is under incredible pressure. And, John, I would say, as a Republican, a fiscal conservative, that we have done not only what we should have done, but in many cases, including investment in transportation infrastructure, we have cut too much, and we are not doing enough. That's absolutely true. The key is to have the wisdom and the political smarts, really. I mean, it's a fellow last night, he said it's a political conundrum, is to, you look at how many members have signed pledges or whatever, saying they won't do this and they won't do that, and you got so many Democrats on the House floor, certainly on the House, and I think the Senate as well. You even mention the word reform of Medicare, that they get so self-righteous, and the indignation, well, you don't care about our seniors. No, I'm not going there. I say, listen, it is because I care about our seniors that I want to slow down just the rate of growth. It's going to increase. It's just a matter of how much. And Republicans, and that's one reason I'm proud to be a Republican. There are days when I'm not. I wince and I cringe at things that are done or things that people say. But when it comes to fiscal matters, strong defense, strong foreign policy, check, check, check. Republicans win. And I'm really proud of our conference. We've done a good job on discretionary spending. Need to lighten up on a few things and do some more reinvestment. We got to figure out something on Alzheimer's, John. I mean, the fiscal driver that Dave kind of walked you through, much of that is due to that debilitating, horrible disease. It's just consuming more and more of our resources. And I, for one, don't think we're investing enough. We're smart people, and God willing, we can find a cure, or at least find something to really slow it down.
Congressman Rigell, I want to thank you, as always, for your candor. I've got one more question, because you were talking about jobs and the economy. And the first time we met, 2010, I believe, I was with a Tribune company. The first time we met,
right,
you told me, you showed me a chart, and you said, whatever they're telling you, at the end of the day, the country is driving red ink as far as the eye can see. There's no answer. So you've been consistent on that. I want to get to Obama's EPA. We've got these ozone regulations coming down the pike, Congressman, in Virginia that have the capability to cripple our state's recovery. Nobody is talking about it except me. What can we do to stop it?
John, it's I just feel like, if you're defending some fort somewhere and you realize, you don't have one army coming at you from one direction, you've got like thousands of attackers from behind, on the side, frankly, coming from above and below. I mean, that's what's happening with the Obama administration. I mean, everything from shutting down how much water we can use in a dishwasher, to where you can't even have clean plates and stuff. I mean, that's a minor, almost comical point, but it makes the point. From the serious matter of this ozone initiative, I met on Monday, I met with local business leaders there who are trying to get a great development going in Hampton Road, can't because of the dysfunction and the arrogance of EPA and EPA-inspired regulations, and it ripples all the way down into the Army Corps of Engineers as it relates to property and our waterways. And, John, I'll say this. We as Republicans, let me pivot back for a second. And I've been, I think, constructively critical of the Republican Party when it's needed. But if the legislation that I have voted for and the House has passed over these 4.5 years had been in place in law, we would not be experiencing this. The REINS Act, for example, thoughtfully, wisely would constrain these matters. We pass it. Does the president do anything for it? Does he No, not only does he not advocate for it, he says, hey, that thing gets to my desk, I'm voting no. Look, the president has a lot of personal appeal, and anyone who doesn't recognize that, I think, is missing the point. I mean, it's smoke and mirrors. There's no substance there, and to the extent that there is, it damages our country and is deconstructing those things which have made it unique and special and exceptional. And I can't wait for this year and a half to go by. I'm counting off the days, and we need a new and better leader, certainly a Republican, and certainly one that can provide the sober, wise leadership that we need, and I think would truly lift up all Americans, not just some, not all those the Democratic charges against us, but lift up every hardworking American family, lower income, middle income, and let our folks make a living again. Wow, there's so much to do, John. We're fighting.
Well, you keep fighting. You keep fighting, Congressman. We're out of time. I really appreciate your being with us. Again, more information, Rigell.house.gov.